But we got to go right to Vince with the travesty and the train wreck that is the Los Angeles Kings with the firing of the GM and the coach.
In the span of about 24 hours, the Kings lost their voice, Bob Miller, to retirement, and their head coach and their GM. So Daryl Sutter, Dean Lombardi, the GM, who the architects of 2 Stanley Cup championships, gone. And there's part of me that is probably like a typical Kings fan that's looking at it and saying they needed to do something different. But I really thought Sutter and Lombardi were going to get a pass this year. I really thought that with the injury to Quick on October 12th, he was out.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that
until
before.
February, and then a couple of the bigger stars, Kopitar, and Gaborik, just not performing. 12 goals for Kopitar this year.
Yeah.
Gaborik with about 10 or 12, just not up to snuff. But I think it came down to philosophy. And so the AEG group came in. They elevated Luc Robitaille to the president of hockey and business operations and Hall of Famer. And Hall of Famer Rob Blake is now the general manager. And he was sort of Lombardi's understudy, so he knows that role. And I think Kings fans are saying, gosh, it's not typically those Hall of Fame players who can kind of step into the GM role and excel. Steve Yzerman is one of those types of guys, and I think everybody's hoping that Blake will be that kind of general manager. But he learned from one of the best in Lombardi. But Lombardi made some decisions, sort of like Kupchak with the Lakers, that handcuffed the Kings from a salary cap point of view, some very long contracts, and we can go into those in a little bit, and really tied up to some guys for a long, long time. And this team is getting older, and this team tends to be, heavy, grinded out, possession type of hockey.
Exactly.
And the trend is towards fast, skilled guys. And I think we saw that when Drew Doughty, if you saw any of those games recently against Edmonton, Connor McDavid was just skating rings around everybody. And Drew Doughty said, yeah, that's on me. He says, I also need a little help from my teammates. But he also said he embarrassed me. He just embarrassed me. And I think that not just on defense, but on offense is where the Kings really suffered. They were just among the worst in all of hockey. So they're number 27 in shooting percentage. They had trouble scoring. They're a possession team that had trouble scoring. And some of the advanced stats on this are encouraging. So like the Corsi, which is shots plus shots attempted that miss the net and shot attempts that are blocked, they were number 1 in the NHL in the Corsi. Yeah, and also number 2 in the Corsi against. So they're a possession hockey team. They're not giving up a lot of shots. They're getting a lot of shots. They're just not scoring.
Right.
So that was a big deal. And I think what happens here is that AEG says we want that more exciting brand of hockey,
more entertaining. Yeah.
You look down the I-5 and you've got a team that has won 5 consecutive Pacific Division championships. And you can't let that happen anymore. So even though they've won, 2 of the last 6 Stanley Cups, they've won 1 playoff game in the last 3 years. Yeah. And so something had to change, and they blew them out. So I don't know that it's a total catastrophe. Some of what it seemed to be, and Helene Elliott, who covers the Kings for the Los Angeles Times, was talking that some of it came to a head in that final game against the Ducks, where Iginla and Gaborik were playing, and none of the kids. So Sutter just didn't want to play any of the kids. So they've got Adrian Kempe, Johnny Brodzinski, 2 forwards who are going to be the future of this team, and then Paul Ledoux, who's a great defenseman, coming up as well. He didn't play them at all. He scratched all of them, and he went with the veterans. And I think
why? It's not. If the 8th seed was in play and you needed to win the game,
at that point they were out.
Exactly.
They were too far out, and they really didn't need to. But that was just Sutter's way of saying, this is how I'm going to play. This is the brand of hockey. I'm an old school, grind it out type of coach. I've got my veterans. I take care of my veterans, and he just didn't give enough time to the rookies and the youngsters. And I think that's what we're seeing is that AEG has come in and said, Luke, what are we doing? And we got to blow them out because this is not the brand of hockey that's being played down in Anaheim. And it's not the kind of hockey that's being played in the Western Conference.
Right.
And, we won 2 championships with this hard, heavy, grinded out possession hockey, but we're not going to be able to do that going on.
I give a little bit of the blame to Lombardi, I think. I don't. You play with the dealt that cards you're dealt, and I don't think that he really gave Suter the players that can play the type of hockey that AEG wants. AEG rather. I just think that Suter's hands were tied. I mean, you got to give him younger players. I know he has salary cap problems, but like you said, it's finesse, it's speed, it's quickness, it's you got to go that way, and you got to change your philosophy, and the Kings just didn't do it.
They're over the cap. Kopitar has a contract through 2024. Mike Richards has a contract that I think might pay him beyond 2024, and Gaborik is on the books till 2021. Dustin Brown is on the books till 2022. Carter until 2022, and not that those are gigantic contracts, but they're big enough.
Yeah, well,
they're big enough. You're over the cap,
add them all up,
and you're handcuffed.
One of the things that's new now with hockey is the 19 and 18, 19 and 20-year-olds too. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got the kid Connor McDavid, and you get the kid Matthews out of Toronto, and you're starting to see these kids at 19 and 20 starting to come up now and make an impact and go down that same category you're talking about: speed, quickness, no fear. They don't care who they're playing against, and I'm just wondering if that's, like you said, Suter's like, hey, look here are my guys. I'm playing these guys, even though he's got some young kids on the bench ready to go. So,
right.
And again, I agree with you, John. I mean, why are you playing these
that's
veterans when it has nothing to, and where you were up in that game 2-1, I think, and ended up losing 3-2, I think, against the Ducks or something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's the teams that win in the playoffs and go deep, they have goalies who are standing on their heads, or who are capable of standing on their heads and carrying you through series, and you're getting production out of your third and fourth lines. Yeah. At least your third in deep in the playoffs, and the Kings were barely getting that out of their first and second lines. Kopitar, I'd have to find the number, but I think it's 12 goals all season, and not that he was extremely healthy, but that's a disaster.
He should be able to do that with his eyes closed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gaborik. Kopitar with 12. Dustin Brown had 14. He's starting back on the uptick. Trevor Lewis with 10. Gaborik with 10. Trevor Lewis with 12. Gaborik with 10. Jeff Carter's the only one. 32 goals. And then it's Tanner Pearson. Those guys were scoring. But no speed. No real skill. It's dump, chase, cycle, grind it out, and that's not going to work. And that's not going to work anymore. And that's what it looks like Robitaille and Luke Robitaille and Rob Blake are going to try and bring to this team in the future, and bring up these kids. Like I said, Kempe and Brodzinski should have had more time. And that kind of game, that kind of atmosphere against the Ducks, and Helene Elliott of the LA Times was saying, that's the exact kind of game where you need to see if these kids can produce and how they handle
the Ducks had to win that game, or at least get to overtime.
They needed to get the point to clinch the Pacific Championship, and so it's one of those. It's a rivalry. So you needed to have those kids in, and he didn't.
What can they realistically? With the salary cap restrictions? How fast can this thing change? What can they do?
Again, they've got some of the kids, some of the pieces to bring them up, and that might facilitate a trade. Again, the rumors are going to come up, but guys like Brownie and Doughty, might be on the block. I love Drew Doughty. I think he's terrific. But he has slowed down, and if he doesn't have help on the defensive end, from guys like Martinez and Muzzin, then it's going to be another long season. And again, they just couldn't afford to lose a guy like Quick, who was going to keep him in games. They lost him for a long time, but then there just was no production. There just was no production at all from this. They played a little better, for a while. They had a good stretch at the end of March and the beginning of April, and then they just didn't have enough points to grind it out.
Give me your thoughts on where they go to get a coach.
It's interesting. What I've read, and I really didn't know who was going to be available. But again, after somebody wins a national championship, they start talking about the University of Denver coach and University of Minnesota Duluth. Again, that's always something that gets thrown out there. There's really no ties for that to happen. But Mike Stothers, who is the head coach of the Reign, the Ontario Reign, and they won the Calder Cup 2 years ago. They're playing for the Calder Cup again this year. That's an easy move up, and he knows the youngsters, and could be the fit for them. So that could be the way they go. But again, it's LA. They're looking to get somebody who might be a big name. That might not sit well, but we'll see. I think that's going to be a good indication of where they're headed with this team. Yeah. If they go with somebody like Stothers from the Reign, then you'll see that it's about youth and it's about speed and skill. But if they get a different coach, somebody who's tried and tested and has been there, then we're going to have to see, how did they get their name? Are they a player coach, a veteran coach? Are they going to develop the kids? So
Plus, they already have 3 other coaches out there, don't they, besides Suter, or 2 others? The coach from Dallas was fired, Ruff. Yeah. And there was another coach that...
the coach from Florida got let go when their actual team was going in the right direction.
That's right.
And they let him go. I forget his name, Jim something. And then the other thing that I heard, there was a couple guys that interviewed for the new Vegas job, and now that
things are on hold. I'd say Sutter is definitely a front runner for that. I don't think there's any question.
I agree. But there were some guys that interviewed for that job that are now kind of, whoa, this might be my new position here.
Right.
So, but I heard the Denver coach came up because he's got NHL background. I think there's and I don't know if you know that the assistant that actually runs your power plays or the defense for your power plays is actually a good coach. They just don't know if he's a good head coach. That's the one thing that they're talking about.
And can you take that chance in developing the kids? But we'll see.
And just one thing about your personnel there. One thing I think we got lucky with our Ducks is Bernier actually played great behind when Gibson went down.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the guy behind, I don't know who's behind. Quick, but that was a big
Budai, and then Bishop, and that was that was one of the,
because when you lose Quick, you lose a lot. Right, that guy is phenomenal.
They didn't have somebody who was really ready to step in. Budai was going to be a backup guy, give Quick a spell. So when they lost him, they didn't really know what to do. So Budai was elevated. He really wasn't quite ready, and then that was another one of the things that probably Lombardi and was going to take the heat for, is that when they were still in the hunt for the playoffs and the trade deadline showed up, he went out and got a 39-year-old Jerome Iginla and Ben Bishop, a goalie, because and then 2 weeks later, Quick's back and playing well. So now Bishop's going to be an unrestricted free agent, and Iginla could retire. He's a free agent, and you've got nothing to show for it. And you didn't help your team in the playoffs.
That was one of the biggest pickups we got, because Bernier came from Toronto, I think, and he was the backup in Toronto, because we lose Freddie Anderson to Toronto. The reason why is because you could only secure one goalie going into this new expanded franchise. So we knew Gibson was our guy, so we couldn't have both of them in contract.
Yeah, you're going to lose one
so
of
we're
them.
going to lose one of them. Well,
Right.
Gibson was, so we let Freddie go, but right when we let him go, we went and picked up Bernier, who was the backup in Toronto, and it's worked out phenomenally. But that's the big real, because you can only secure one goalie
Right.
when you're doing the expansion draft. So.
All right, we're taking care of the Kings disaster.
I think we'll see. It's,
Work in progress.
We're still a little shell shocked by it, but something had to change.
It's going to be an interesting,
something had to
interesting off season.
Yeah.
to say the least.